Today, I wanted to talk about bulking, cutting, and maintaining. I wanted to talk about recomposition. I wanted to talk about what all of these words mean. Because when I first started lifting, I didn't understand any of this terminology. I wanted a flat stomach, and I thought what I needed to do in order to get that flat stomach was to lose fat. Period. And I thought that's all that it was. But I realized that when it comes to shape-shifting, bodybuilding, if all you do is lose fat, but you don't have the muscle underneath that actually shapes the physique, you're not gonna look like what you think you're gonna look like. You're not gonna look like what you wanna look like. Something that I really had to come to terms with is that in order for me to look good lean, I need to actually have muscle mass. Once I realized this, I spent a lot more time gaintaining. I spent a lot more time bulking than cutting. And you learn to realize that for a majority of the year, for most of us, we're not gonna look super lean because we need to be building the muscle to have a fat ass. We need to be building the muscle to have a nice developed back so that it creates the illusion of a snatched waist. We need to have the muscle that makes our legs look athletic. So really, when women come to me and they're like, hey, I want to tone, and I was guilty of using this terminology myself, like saying that I wanted to tone, really what you're saying is that you want to gain just enough muscle and lose just enough fat to make yourself look tight and athletic. And that's what toning really is. So a lot of people are like afraid to gain muscle, but it's the muscle that makes us look good, girl. You know what I mean? And no, you're not gonna get super bulky and look like Hulk smash. It actually takes many, many years of hard, diligent work to look like Hulk smash, okay? A lot of people ask me whether they should cut, bulk, or recomp first, and I want to go into my thoughts. I want to go into what these three words mean to then help you decide where to begin, especially as a beginner. In my humble experience, it's been 4 years that I've been lifting, a little over 3 years that I've been a fitness coach, helping other women get snatched. I have had very few clients who are ready to go straight into a bulk or straight into a cut. Most people, including myself, really just benefited from a recomp phase for the first, honestly, like 1 to 2 years of lifting. This is my hot take, and I'm gonna explain why I think that is. Before we get into it, let's backtrack a little bit and define what a cut, what a bulk, and what a recomp is. A cutting phase is eating in a caloric deficit for an allotted period of time with the goal of losing weight and holding on to as much muscle mass as possible. That's what us in the bodybuilding and in the strength training community call a cut. A bulk is eating in a caloric surplus for an allotted period of time with the goal of gaining muscle mass while gaining as little fat as possible. Recomping is this idea that you can eat at a caloric maintenance, typically for an extended period of time, with the goal of gaining muscle and losing fat at the same time. Here's why I wouldn't recommend cutting or bulking right out of the gate for most people. When it comes to cutting, I work primarily with women, and most of the women in my experience who have sought me out as a coach are most likely coming from a background of chronic undereating or chaotic eating. Basically, what that means is they don't really have any type of consistency with their eating. Their eating is very sporadic, it's all over the place. They're most likely not making the time to eat 3 balanced meals a day. Typically, this is also accompanied with a slowed down metabolism. So our bodies have this thing called metabolic adaptation. When you eat very little food for prolonged periods of time, our body gets really good at slowing down our metabolism and surviving off of that little amount of food. So a lot of women who are coming with me are just not in an ideal state to lose fat because their body is in a position where it's not going to be as responsive to fat loss because they're already eating so sporadically and very little. Does that make sense? So for a lot of the women who come to work with me, I immediately put them into a reverse diet, which a reverse diet, all it is slowly over time increasing the amount of food that you're eating in a day so that your metabolism slowly upregulates to this new amount of food. And while this is happening, they're typically recomping. So they're gaining a shit ton of muscle, they're losing fat, and they're eating more food, and they're repairing their metabolism, and they're basically getting ready, preparing their body to be very responsive to a fat loss phase. It doesn't mean that fat loss is impossible with the slow metabolism. In my experience, it just makes it a lot more difficult to lose fat and keep it off. I actually came from a background of disordered eating where I was already restricting my food a lot, restricting the types of foods that I could eat. I already was thinking a lot about food, feeling out of control around food, struggling with restriction and binge eating cycles. And so I personally was not a good candidate for a cutting phase when I first started my lifting journey because I just wasn't mentally, psychologically ready to put my body under that stress. My metabolism was not ready to be put under that stress. So I actually ended up doing like gaintaining, doing a recomp phase, eating at maintenance, slowly recovering my metabolism for like 2.5 years before I felt psychologically ready and like I had the tools to do my first cut. Not only that, but it's difficult to build muscle if you are always in a deficit. So we go to the gym, we work out, we train really hard, and then the food that we eat contains the building blocks for us to build a fat ass, for us to build the muscle that we need to change our physique, to have a toned physique. So if you're somebody who's chronically dieting, how are you gonna have, for one, the energy to work out hard? And if your energy is suffering in your training sessions, you're not gonna be maximizing your muscle gains. Then how are you gonna build muscle if you don't have enough nutrients, enough calories, enough energy in your body to repair the muscles that you're tearing? Realizing that you can't build while you're trying to shrink. You gotta pick one or the other, and that's kind of like the funny joke that a lot of people in the bodybuilding, fitness industry, fitness world say. It's like, you can't have a fat ass and rock hard abs at the same time. You gotta pick one or the other. Either you're building the glutes, building the muscles, and getting a little fluffy, or you're kind of pausing the building process and you're going into a leaning out process. So usually we build first, we build our foundation, we build a lot of muscle. That's our growing phase, our building phase, and then we have our cutting phase. But most bodybuilders that you see that are shredded on stage, people that look really good on Instagram, they're building for most of the year. They're bulking or maintaining or gaintaining for most of the year and preparing their bodies to be receptive for a fat loss phase. If all you want to do is shrink, 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 cut, you're just not gonna have the shape that you want, that nice, beautiful, muscular, athletic shape. So yeah, when I first started working out, I made the mistake of overdoing cardio, not doing weightlifting, and under eating, and all I got was like a stringy, noodly physique. Like I didn't have a booty, I didn't have legs, I had no muscularity. I kind of was left with like a skinny fat look where even though I'm way too skinny, I don't have very much, if any, muscle mass on my body. So all that's left is like skin and bones and fat, you know what I mean? Whereas in my experience, I found that if you have muscles on your body, you can have like a wider body fat range and still look really shapely and really dope because you have the muscle underneath the fat that's like shaping the physique. As for bulking, really my only concern is, as a beginner, you don't really know how to train hard yet and you don't really know how to eat well yet. Like you haven't found your footing in the lifestyle yet. And so if you go straight into a bulk where you're trying to eat a shit ton of calories, you don't really know how to train hard yet, you don't really have the foundations of your health yet, you just might pack on a lot of excess fat, a lot more fat than you had hoped. You can work this fat off, but it can just be very difficult. Like, why would you pack on that much fat if you don't have to and still build the same amount of muscle? So yeah, I find that for beginners, bitch, if you sneeze, you're gonna build muscle. So As long as you're just focusing on eating enough and focusing on doing a nice reverse diet, slowly increasing your food, learning how to eat 3 balanced meals a day, and slowly learning how to train hard, it's usually enough. And then after maybe like 3 to 6 months, maybe even a whole year of just learning how to train hard and eat well, then maybe you're like, fuck yeah, it's time for a bulk. As for recomping, here's what I think. I think most people would benefit from an extended recomping phase, especially as women. Like, I feel like men typically have this very competitive, I go to the gym to fight my demons mentality. A lot of the women that I've worked with don't necessarily have that mindset. The ones that do, we definitely can benefit from them and go hard as fuck. But for the rest of us that have never really been athletic, this is our first time feeling what it's like to push our bodies to these kinds of limits. I feel like it's really important for the first like 6 months to a year to just have some fucking fun. Just go in the gym, learn these exercises, learn how to start testing your body's limits, have fun in the kitchen, learning new recipes, like learning how to eat healthy in a way that tastes good. And if we can just focus on making it fun, the lifestyle is gonna be more sustainable because we actually wanna do it because it's fun. And there's not a pressure to like train like a maniac. My camera shut off, but we're back. Because it doesn't matter how perfect your bulk is, how perfect your cutting phase is, like down to the T. If you're not able to stick with it because it's not enjoyable for you, you're not gonna show up. Nothing is gonna get done. And sometimes it's better to operate suboptimally if that means that you show up and you consistently give 50%. It's better than sticking to it 100% for a week or two and then falling off for 3 to 4 months. For most of us, just being 50% consistent for a long ass fucking time is enough to get us to where we're trying to go. Personally, for my first 2 to 3 years of lifting, I didn't count calories. I didn't know how to train super hard. I didn't follow one program for a super long period of time, but I was having fun and I learned a lot. And after about 2 years of doing this, I finally felt ready to kind of like take things to the next level for myself. And then I started counting calories, and then I did my first cut, and then I did my first bulk. What I tell a lot of my clients is why don't we set the foundation for the first 12 weeks minimum, and then at the 12-week mark, we can decide, would we like to continue setting down this foundation, or do you feel ready to go into a bulk, or do you feel ready to go into a cut? And when they're feeling a little bit nervous or antsy, like I don't know if I'm ready, I'll tell them, hey, you could always start a bulk, or you could always start a cut, and we keep checking in every single week. And if for whatever reason you decide that you want to pull back, you don't feel ready, you can just come out of it. It's that simple, especially since bulks and cuts are such, if you do them correctly, they're very gradual and slow, and you're only changing your calories very slowly and over time. So it's not like you immediately start a cut and you immediately are super hungry, or it's not like you immediately start a bulk and you pack on a bunch of fat. If you're doing these phases correctly, they're slow, they're steady, they're fluid. Like you can dip your toe in, see how you feel, and you can dip your toe out. And that kind of wraps up everything that I want to say. I'll leave you with this. Answer the following questions to tell if you are ready for a cut or a bulk. If you have checked off most of these items on this list, you are most likely ready for a cut or a bulk. You have a good relationship to food. You have a good relationship to your body. Being that just because you want to improve your body doesn't mean you have to bully yourself. So if you're somebody with a history of like being really mean to yourself and feeling like your body is the most important thing about you to a fault, you're probably not ready to shapeshift. You're somebody who trusts your body's natural signals. Basically, you are in tune with your hunger signals. You're in tune with your fatigue signals. Typically, my anxious perfectionists who are really good at pushing themselves to extremes and have a history of burnout are typically not in tune with their body's signals and could benefit from a period of just learning how to stop and breathe and ask yourself, like, am I hungry? Am I full? Am I tired? Should I work out today or should I take a rest day? Like, these are things that are important to be in tune with, because if you cut too aggressively and you lose too much too quickly, you are more susceptible to weight regain. If you are training so hard and so intensely that you're not giving yourself enough time to recover and you're overtraining, you could also be holding yourself back from seeing the progress that you want to be seeing. So it's really important to get really good at understanding your body's signals. Are you eating 3 meals a day and at least 0.7 grams of protein per pound of body weight per day? So for example, I weigh 150 pounds right now. 0.7 of 150 pounds I think is like 120. So I'm eating around 120 to 150 grams of protein per day. Do you know how to train hard? Meaning you know how to train 2 to 3 reps away from muscular failure. Are you strength training at least 2 to 4 times a week? Are you getting 8 hours of sleep every night? Are you getting 7 to 10,000 steps per day? Do you have positive ways to cope with life stressors outside of the gym? I'm talking therapy, journaling, meditation, reading mindset books, hanging out with friends. If you've maintained most of these habits for at least 12 weeks, but preferably for as long as possible, then you are most likely super duper ready for a cut or a bulk. If you're not quite there yet, there is nothing wrong with doing what I did and just maintaining and recomping and reverse dieting for the first year or so of your lifting journey. Yeah.